Welcome to this special edition of News Channel 7.
A bird's eye view of Hurricane Michael 5 years later.
I'm Donna Bell.
And I'm Jessica Foster. On October 10th, 2018, Category 5 Hurricane Michael made landfall right here in Mexico Beach.
Over the next hour, we're taking you around our community as we look back at the historic storm that changed the landscape of the Florida Panhandle forever.
As we travel to various places, we're going to show you video from the ground and from the air to see the progress that's been made in the last 5 years. We also look at what's left to be done. It's been a long road to recovery. The days leading up to this storm, watching it make landfall and the aftermath required a non-stop approach to coverage.
Our meteorologists Chris Smith and Ryan Michaels tell us Hurricane Michael rapidly intensified, causing damage that our area had never seen before.
A hurricane warning remains in effect for all of Northwest Florida, as well as a storm surge warning.
Well, the National Weather Service out of Tallahassee here this morning sent out a public advisory, and they named Hurricane Michael an unprecedented storm, something we've never seen in the Panhandle.
We knew we were going to be dealing with something stronger than just a regular hurricane.
Michael is going to end up being the benchmark storm for our area as far as the worst storm ever.
Anything in the Western Caribbean, anything that develops around Central America, around the Yucatan, always has your #1 attention when it comes to something tropical, because that usually opens up into the Gulf, and then everybody in the Gulf is on alert.
But you're never thinking like this is going to be one of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit the United States, and it's going to come right into your viewing area.
By Sunday, we knew that we were looking at a storm system that was coming up to the Panhandle, and we knew that we were looking at something that was going to be stronger than something that we've ever seen here before.
In a way, you're hoping that things are going to kind of unravel as what's causing this thing to steer, get some dry air and anything to keep it from intensifying, but it just didn't happen. It just kept going and going and going. And every advisory came out was worse than the one before. It's actually looking better organized this evening. You can see how cold the cloud tops are. We may be getting to see the eye reform across the hurricane.
And the outer band of the eye wall itself was just starting to get onto the east side of Panama City Beach, and you could hear the winds outside just whipping through.
I was on air, and it was getting obviously really bad at that point, and then all of a sudden, you know, you could hear the roof, and you're almost like just narrating at that point. And some very gusty winds before we finally give. What was that?
We didn't quite know what it was, and I believe Chris might have even alluded to maybe a tree fell outside of the station. We didn't know quite what it was, and we're not about to go stick our head outside to look.
Treat this like it was a tornado warning. We were on the air telling you a tornado, because this is going. Then all of a sudden, bam, power goes out. And it was just like the most helpless thing in the world. This is our studio. You can hear the water leaking in.
I mean, it was pitch black. We lost power. We didn't, there was leaks happening in the studio. So we knew that the safest place to be was actually in the other part of the building, to leave the studio and to go into what was built more like a bunker.
Okay, guys, we lost power. We're going into a central room.
There's chunks of the roof everywhere.
At that point, there are still people that were watching. And from what we had heard, the last thing that they saw or heard Chris say was that the roof, and then just went black. So anybody watching at home, they, just might have thought that we, just got taken out.
I'm like, well, we can't broadcast per se, but I said we can at least get on Facebook. We still do have cell service, so we'll see how long this lasts, and I'll continue to keep you all updated as best we can. Feel free to share around as you want, but this is what it looks like outside the TV station right now. You know that you're, for people that can watch you or were able to watch you, that you're at least like a voice on the outside. Wasn't anything I could do to fix it, but at least I was, we were a voice. Basically, right now, the eye is now crossing over. Mexico Beach is in the eye wall. So I'm broadcasting on Facebook, and I remember talking to my wife and son. I was doing a broadcast, and all of a sudden, they chimed in, trying to reach me. I'll check in, but everyone's okay here, and the worst of it's over, at least the TV station. And I remember talking to them.
Hey, Daddy, are you on the power?
Yeah, we don't have any power, buddy. But, you could just see the relief that she had, that, we were all okay and everything.
How does a storm like Michael change the way you do your job?
There's a sense of dread, because I don't know if I could do it again.
Anytime a hurricane is in the Gulf, as a news team, we start looking at the possible scenarios to see where we need to put those news crews in place.
I've worked at WJHG for 29 years, almost 10 as the news director. I've covered numerous hurricanes and tropical storms, but nothing like this.
Our emergency plan requires going wall to wall with coverage, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. We had reporters positioned at hotels all across the viewing area. We also had all critical staff at the station moving in and planning to stay for days. Donna and I were anchoring the morning before Michael hit. We'll never forget the hours before the storm when Chris and Ryan told us to get ready. It would be a Category 4 or 5.
We're likely going to see those winds go up even as it works its way still further towards the coastline. There's just nothing really to stop this storm.
At about 11 a.m., the noises got to be too much. The roof was far less sturdy in the studio than in the rest of the building, so we moved to our newsroom and started broadcasting from there. I'll never forget, right before we went off air, looking out the newsroom windows and seeing pine trees across the street snapping in half. I had never seen anything like that.
No, and the rain and wind got so intense, we couldn't see anything out the windows. And as the howling sounds began, we knew we had to take shelter in interior offices. We thought the powerful generator we had would never go out, but it did.
We have everybody that's in the station here, our news director, Donna Bell.
We did the best we could to keep doing our jobs and keep information going out to the public for as long as we could. Even when we went off air, we knew that we had to keep telling people what was happening. Most of us had lost cell service, and at one point, we were passing the only phone at the station around to each of us because it was the only one that still had service. That was the only way that our meteorologists could tell people what was happening to whoever could hear us.
And when the storm finally passed, we did the best that we could to get information out to the public. We divided into groups and started driving around, going live on Facebook, just reporting on what we saw.
So much debris is covering the roadway, we simply just couldn't get across.
It's landed on some of the cars, it landed on some of the trucks.
Pretty unbelievable right now. We see people driving and the entire front portion of the home is still.
We've been told that heading through Mexico Beach is dangerous right now.
For me, the hardest part of going through Michael was losing contact with our reporting teams. I was so relieved when I started seeing them doing Facebook Lives because I knew then they were okay. And they went right into reporting mode, showing our viewers what they were seeing.
It looks like a hurricane hit Panama City Beach. This looks like a bomb hit Panama City.
Some did not get back to the station for several days because the roads were blocked by trees. We were so happy to see them again.
You're crying. Yeah. What's up? How are you? Welcome back.
As a news station, Hurricane Michael taught us to expect the unexpected and improvise. While we were back on air a short time after Michael hit, exactly who could actually see us was unknown. And in our damaged studio, we were limited. At one point, we just pointed the only working camera at a laptop and pulled up whatever video we could get. State and local leaders would stop by randomly to get important information out.
I think we as a station just did what everyone else did, the best we could, because nothing really prepares you for your community becoming a disaster zone.
As our cameras got out and started getting a first view of the damage, the place that was most shocking was right here in Mexico Beach.
A week before the storm, we flew our Sky 7 drone right here in Mexico Beach over the canal. This is what it looked like. In the days after Hurricane Michael, we flew our drone over the exact same spot. The difference was shocking.
Mexico Beach was devastated, but this small beach community was also resilient. This is what it looks like today, 5 years later, a community building back.
When you see video like that, it really makes you think what a horrible experience it must have been for the people of Mexico Beach going through Hurricane Michael.
It was devastating, it really was. And News Channel 7's Stephen Maxwell has the story of one family who remembers it all too well.
Horrible roar. And you just waited, and you could literally feel it hit.
It's hard to imagine for Tracy Gaddis. It's been 5 years.
This is where we stayed up here.
This is where Tracy, 8 of her family members, and 4 dogs rode out Hurricane Michael in Mexico Beach, climbing into this cramped space when the water started rising.
And my grandson screamed, "We're all gonna die, we're all gonna die," which just pierced my heart. And I said to him,
Nana said, "No, we're not. In the name of Jesus, amen."
Wow. Did that help?
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine. It's taken a lot of prayers and faith to get this family where they are today. A similar story for hundreds who made their home in Mexico Beach. The Cat 5 storm destroyed much of the quiet beach community. City officials say about 85% of the city's homes were damaged. 5 years later, it's a different sight.
You know, Mexico Beach, a lot of that side of the road were the little beach houses, and now they're big, they're beautiful. That's kind of neat seeing that, the different designs.
Sir, you need some help. You're good. Great.
Just down the road from Tracy,
all right.
Al Cathy is running things at his hardware store.
I've never thought Mother Nature could do so much damage in 3 hours.
He was the mayor when Michael hit, and for a guy in the business of building, seeing the city build back so quickly took him by surprise.
And today, who would have thought in almost 5 years that Mexico Beach would look like it does. You know, we look new, we look brighter, we look like we're healthy.
For the past 5 years, locals have been making it their business to make sure Mexico Beach is built back better. But some say the next step is more business.
We need more businesses. Disappointed that we don't have more.
You can find places scattered down Highway 98, a few restaurants, hotels, and stores. But longtime locals like Al and Tracy say it's not enough.
We're still lacking a grocery store. We're still lacking restaurants.
We need food places. You need to be able to go somewhere on Mexico Beach.
So what's the holdup? Cathy says it's a number of factors.
When you're mom and pop, you don't have corporate America to support you. So there's some of those business owners that are trying to decide if there's a customer base to support their business.
And we had some trees over here. And
although there's work to be done, it's brighter days for Mexico Beach, especially when you remember the darkest times.
And I'll just look up and it'll hit me that it's like hallowed ground, because that's where we were saved from the hurricane.
In Mexico Beach, Stephen Maxwell, News Channel 7.
While so much has been rebuilt in the last 5 years, there are other places that remain untouched.
And some say they feel forgotten. We'll take you there when we come back.
You're watching Hurricane Michael 5 years later, presented in part by Cat 5 Hurricane Fabric and Arbor Tree Care.
By 2019, the Forgotten Coast lived up to its name. Our area felt forgotten.
The rest of the world moved on, but they didn't know how much the people of our local communities were struggling.
It's going to be our home. The car that was totaled in the hurricane, this is our home.
6 months after the Category 5 hurricane, lawmakers still had not passed a federal relief package for 2018. Then came the Angels. A group of women formed Michael's Angels. Their goal was to go to the state and federal level to get funding for hurricane victims. We partnered with them, doing stories every day about the suffering.
because you'd be surprised at how many kids still aren't registered for school. A lot because they're displaced and they're not sure where to register them because next week I may be somewhere else.
And the week after that, somewhere else. Some kids experienced an endless cycle of moving homes, and for some, that cycle still isn't over.
As the voice of the people grew louder, the angels took to the road, and we followed them. We shared a countdown on air and on social media, showing just how many days had passed without a federal relief package.
Today marks 202 days since Hurricane Michael devastated the Panhandle. That means it's been 202 days without congressional help.
After Hurricane Katrina, it took 10 days. After Andrew, 34 days. The wait for our area seemed endless.
Finally, on day 236, the wait was over. Congress passed a $19 billion aid package.
While that help did come in the form of federal funding, many in our area still feel forgotten. And that's especially true in our lower income and largely minority communities like Glenwood.
And as News Channel 7's Takivion Goss reports, one cornerstone of that community has still not come back.
The Martin Luther King Center is being like most things in our community. We the last, we the least, we the left behind, and whatever's left, that's what the city will give us and say, well, now we don't have the money to do it.
Tony Bostic is one of many. He's frustrated to see many things being rebuilt in Panama City, but the Martin Luther King Rec Center still has not come back.
The Martin Luther King Rec Center was more than just a building here in Glenwood. It was a staple in the community. And 5 years following Hurricane Michael, all that remains is an empty lot. This was a safe place for kids to just come and be kids, but most importantly, it saved them from a life of crime.
The Martin Luther King Rec Center saved a lot of kids from jail. And not only did it serve the Glenwood community, kids from the Hill over in St. Andrews, from Millville, from out in Lynn Haven, they all came together.
5 years after the storm, he's watched many broken communities get pieced back together, but not Glenwood.
Glenwood still hadn't recovered from Hurricane Michael. The rest of the city, if you look out in Lynn Haven, they are doing wonders out there. You look at the city of Callaway, they're growing. Everybody's growing except for the Glenwood community. And who runs the Glenwood community? The city of Panama City.
Panama City officials stress rebuilding is a process, but recognize Glenwood's frustrations.
So the city had a starting place, and where they started was downtown Panama City. The rationale they gave was that's the crossroads, if you will, of the community. They also did a lot of planning, and so we've got plans, and those things take time.
Janice Lucas is a newly elected member of the Panama City Commission and sees the problem from both sides.
5 years later, I can understand the frustration as we see other neighborhoods and other communities around us opening up centers and so forth. I can understand the frustration.
To add to the frustration, repairs are time-consuming and costly.
One of the challenges that we have, and the city addressed that last month, the City Commission did, because we've got grant funds to pay for the plans, but those grants are cost reimbursement. So we've got over $300 million of grants, but we don't have that kind of money in the bank to pay it out and then get it back.
Residents say you can't put a price on the impacts the community center has on the lives of kids, and they want it back.
They've rebuilt almost everything in the city, and you still don't even have final plans for the Martin Luther King Center.
While progress may be slow, it is happening. In February of 2022, the city unveiled plans for a new state-of-the-art recreation center.
Those plans include an area for the kids for technology, as well as cooking, community center, 4 basketball courts, 2 large ones and then smaller ones.
Plans in the works, but still a ways from reality. There's hope this center will eventually come back in a place that feels forgotten.
So let's put something educational here. Let's put something here that's going to build not only community, but it's going to build people. It's easier to repair a broken kid than it is to fix a broken man.
In Panama City, Takivion Goss, News Channel 7.
Other areas that often seem overlooked after natural disasters, are those rural communities.
Farmers, foresters, those who live in quiet towns far from the coast were left with tree damage that went on for miles. It's taken years to rebuild in places like Calhoun County. To make matters worse, many of these hardworking rural residents did not have insurance.
I tried to get insurance when I first got here, 2 or 3 different insurance, where there's areas got a volunteer fire department. And you're supposed to be within 5 miles of and I'm a little bit further than that. And one of the insurance companies would insure me if I dug a great big swimming pool, because once they got here, they would not have enough water to put it out. So I didn't have $30,000 to put a cement pond in my backyard, so I never had insurance.
John and Kimberly LaFollette are like many. They never quite were able to build back what was lost. The hurricane took down much of their Calhoun County farm, and just a few months ago, fire destroyed everything again. They still live in a borrowed camper. Despite their struggles, though, they still have their faith.
I didn't lose any family members. I got real lucky. So that was it, and I thank God. I praise God for that, and I praise God today. After all of this and all of our losses, I praise God.
A lot of people have relied on their faith to get them through.
They certainly have, and in the 5 years since Hurricane Michael, many of these small communities have come back. More housing has been added in places like Jackson County, and we no longer see those rows of homes with blue-tarped roofs.
But there is one thing that has not come back and will not be back anytime soon: the trees. It's something county leaders have reflected on many times in the past.
You're looking at the trees 50 to 100 years. I mean, I will never see the trees back the way they were before Hurricane Michael. I mean, I won't live that long.
According to the Florida Forest Service, 3 million acres of forested land was damaged, causing $1.2 billion worth of timber damage.
When we come back, we're taking you to Tyndall Air Force Base to explore how the rebuilding of this base is key to growth throughout Bay County. Tyndall Air Force Base was in the direct path of Hurricane Michael, with the eye passing right over the base. Every single building on base had some kind of roof damage.
News Channel 7's Dan Nyman sat down with Air Force leaders to see how much progress has been made and what lies ahead.
Surviving a Category 5 hurricane is one thing, but living through the terror right in the eye of the storm is another.
As the eye wall approached us, I could literally see the walls vibrating, and you could hear it.
It's an experience Marty Spikes will never forget. As the flight chief for the 325th Civil Engineer Squadron, his job is to prepare for, respond to, and recover from all hazards. On October 10, 2018, that role included staying at Tyndall Air Force Base as a member of the ride-out element.
In a matter of seconds, on the second floor, water was coming in, the outlets, the lights. We had 2 inches of water on the floor.
Spikes and 92 other members of the team did something few can ever do. They stepped outside as the eye crossed over the base.
Clear blue sky.
The calm in the middle of the storm.
Oh yeah, a lot of trees down here.
Deputy Base Civil Engineer Brian Stahl was also there.
The ones that are standing, when the rest of the eye goes through, are not going to be standing anymore.
Things got a little bit more, probably a little bit more somber, because people realized that this wasn't just going to be something that we just swept up the debris from and moved on.
The damage, catastrophic. Much of Tyndall Air Force Base was reduced to rubble, but there was little time to reflect. As with all military missions, they had a job to do.
We got out, we kind of assessed the situation, and Colonel Laidlaw grabbed everybody and said, okay, let's start preparing to recover.
We started flying aircraft out of here 2 months after Michael. People don't realize how quickly we were able to get the mission going again.
But even as the first aircraft left the runway, Colonel Robert Bartlow says it was clear that rebuild efforts wouldn't take off quite as quickly.
It was difficult to envision
for both the base and the community how they were going to recover given the level of devastation that was apparent right after the storm.
Equally difficult to envision was the process of planning a rebuild.
I'd say the challenge has been, when you're rebuilding a base largely from scratch, there's a lot of planning that goes into that to make sure you do it right.
In June of 2019, Congress approved disaster relief funding for the base, allowing plans to become reality.
We're building now the installation of the future out of the ashes of the base that was here before Michael.
And now, the installation of the future is inching closer to an installation of the present, with a large majority of construction happening within the last year.
Over 90% of the projects right now are under construction. At this point in time, we have all of the projects under contract, except for 2.
It's not just construction on the rise. Rebuild efforts are the foundation for a growing population at the base and in the surrounding community.
The installation, and these are rough numbers, has got about 3,000 people that work on it within the wing and some of the tenant units every day. We're doubling, or in some cases soon we may be more than doubling that number of people on this installation with bringing additional contractors on.
All those people are needed to support what will ultimately be the benchmark for military installations around the world.
Although this was a disaster that negatively impacted a lot of people's lives, I think at the end of the day, this is going to be a great thing for this area. I think it's going to be a great thing for the Air Force and for our military and for our country. What we're doing here to build the installation of the future really is going to be a model that's emulated by other installations around the Air Force and around the world.
And while the base will soon be a model of modern design and new technology, those who stayed on base now have time to look back on what they went through 5 years ago and how far they've come. At Tyndall Air Force Base, Dan Nyman, News Channel 7.
Bringing back the base is key to bringing back the communities around it.
5 years ago, the scenes in places like Callaway were devastating. Homes, businesses, shops, restaurants, all damaged or destroyed. Our crews on the ground, days after Michael hit, recorded their stories.
The entire Parker Callaway area is devastated. People need water. We need cell service restored as soon as possible so we can, start talking to, family and friends that are, all over. We need that as soon as possible. Plus, it would give us access to information.
Some people moved and never came back. But today, as the base rebuilds, new families are moving in.
Well, now there's this fresh new look to these communities on the east side of Bay County. And 5 years later, you can still see progress being made as construction crews work to replace what was lost.
Homes and businesses can be replaced, but lives cannot. We relied on our first responders to get us through these dark times.
But even for them, it was a story of survival.
Up next, we'll take you inside a local police station as first responders continued to serve even after that station was reduced to rubble.
You're watching Hurricane Michael 5 years later, presented in part by Cat 5 Hurricane Fabric and Arbor Tree Care.
Every community has something that makes it unique. In the Cove area of Panama City, most will tell you it was the beautiful canopy of trees that set it apart.
As we talk with locals about the storm, we hear this phrase all too often: I miss the trees. Those trees really made a tangled mess of neighborhoods like this. Some survivors could not get out of their homes for days.
Rescue crews had to cut paths through roadways where hundreds of trees were uprooted by the force of Michael's winds. Neighbors relied on neighbors to get through those days.
In the years since, it's been rebuilt. Homes are now newer, stronger, and built to withstand future storms. But as you drive through the Cove today, you no longer see that lush canopy of trees that set this area apart.
And we had a great life here, and we're going to pick it up and keep moving forward.
Moving to northern Bay County at the Panama Country Club. Homes there were so damaged they had to be bulldozed. Most residents did not evacuate, thinking they would be safe so far from the coast.
But Michael's winds all but devastated the Lynn Haven community, littering the Panama Country Club golf course with piles and piles of trees and debris. It was estimated that thousands of trees came down at this course, established back in 1927, but they worked to bring it back quickly.
Less than a year after the storm, the golf course reopened, and in 2021, the clubhouse finally returned. A major feat, especially considering some other tree-lined golf courses across the area did not reopen after Michael.
As the trees came down, calls for help could not be answered quickly. First responders had to shelter in place just like everyone else, and even they realized that their shelters could not withstand Michael's devastating winds.
As News Channel 7's Claire Jones reports, it has taken a full 5 years to rebuild at the Lynn Haven police station, but it will take much longer to ever forget what they experienced on October 10th, 2018.
We're much further along than I thought we ever would be, but we're not there yet.
Deep scars, healing over.
To know where we are now and to know where we were just 5 years ago, it's a miracle.
A miracle that was hard to imagine while Police Chief Ricky Ramey, fellow officers, and their families rode out the storm in the old police department building.
Where everyone was sleeping, it was like the walls were breathing inside. It used to be the sanctuary of a church, and we had to rush and get everybody out of the sanctuary, and then I'd say probably 15 minutes after that happened, the entire side of that building just collapsed.
Memories he won't soon forget.
We started to spread the message, if you're going to stay, write your Social Security number on your arm with a Sharpie. Because once it got that close, we knew it was going to be rough, and we knew it was going to be bad.
Once the storm passed, News Channel 7 crews were there, and not much was left of the police station where they sheltered.
What we're looking at is where the Lynn Haven police station used to be.
Michael shredded that building like it was nothing. The majority of us were in that building when it crashed in around us. We still, talk about it periodically. But I will say when, we get storms or high winds, especially being in these temporary facilities, it gets nerve-wracking.
Nerve-wracking, but Ramey says his community is moving on.
There's been a lot of healing that has taken place, not only with individuals, including myself, but I would have to also look at the progress of this city. Look at the buildings, the ballparks, and the rebuild, which just gives you so much positivity.
A new city hall and police department now stand in the place of the former one.
What I have realized is the further we get away from Hurricane Michael, the stronger we become.
And they'll use that strength to keep moving forward. In Lynn Haven, Claire Jones, News Channel 7.
There's more to come on this special edition of News Channel 7. It wasn't just people impacted by Hurricane Michael. Many pets were left homeless, too.
We'll look at that story when we come back.
You're watching Hurricane Michael 5 years later, presented in part by Cat 5 Hurricane Fabric and Arbor Tree Care.
In the days after Hurricane Michael, hundreds of lost pets were found amongst the rubble.
These pets were taken to local shelters, many of those becoming overcrowded.
Bay County Animal Services began posting lost and found pets on Facebook, hoping to reunite families. Another sign of a community coming together, strangers taking care of pets until they could be reunited with their owners. One of those shelters, overcrowded and damaged after the storm, was the Bay County Humane Society.
It remains closed today. In this News Channel 7 report, Allison Baker explores the reasons behind the area's only no-kill shelter remaining vacant 5 years later.
Finding a home for homeless animals. It's been a mission of the Humane Society of Bay County since it first opened a shelter in the 1980s.
Recently, the Panama City Commission voted to turn over operation of the animal shelter to the Humane Society on a contract basis.
In the 1990s, the shelter seemingly found its forever home in a dome, the oddly shaped building behind the Panama City Police Department. The organization served as the only no-kill shelter in the county since 2006, until Hurricane Michael changed everything. The storm left the shelter in shambles, damaged but not destroyed. Bay County Humane Society President Mary Godden remembers it well. Other rescue organizations like ASPCA stepped in to help.
These might eat us.
They used our location as like the central hub and for rescue efforts, and then we never closed.
But staying open proved difficult.
The dome itself was always very difficult to sustain even prior to Hurricane Michael. And then when Hurricane Michael happened, the damage that happened to the dome is pretty substantial, but we were able to essentially patch it and keep it open for as long as we could.
Survivors were struggling and donations were dropping.
Everybody was going through the same thing. They lost homes, they lost businesses. So yeah, donations dropped significantly.
Then the pandemic dropped another bomb.
Once COVID hit and everything went into lockdown, there was no money. We had 8 adoptions in the month of February of 2020. That's it.
In April of 2020, Humane Society leaders made the decision to close the doors of this shelter temporarily, saying they would reopen once they had enough funding. But today, 3.5 years later, the shelter remains closed.
We have to make sure that we have the means to be able to come back and be able to stay open.
As the community continues to build back, the shelter remains untouched.
The plans for the rebuild to get a new shelter back open, we want to be able to expand our current capacity as well. So we do want to bring in a bigger shelter than what we currently have.
So reopening the dome, that's out of
the question.
Godin says there are plans in the works.
We're just, I guess you could say, the initial type stages.
The question is, when?
We've got couple contractors that are going to provide us some quotes. We've got a couple engineers that are also submitting in conceptual, of course.
Godin tells us there are no plans she can show us or a timeline for when the shelter will come back.
It's all going to depend on how quickly we can raise funds. Okay. And I don't have a ballpark on that until we get into the grant process.
Until then, Bay County remains without a no-kill shelter, which saddens local animal lovers like Peggy Wilson, a former Humane Society volunteer.
Unfortunately, there is a huge demand for a no-kill shelter, but again, it's really, really, really hard to get that because you got to have the people and funding to take care of it.
According to data from surrounding shelters, the number of animals being put down has increased in our area over the last 2 years, while across the state, data shows a decreasing trend in euthanizations during that time.
We'd have a lot more animals running around or unfortunately picked up by animal control and have the inevitable happen.
But there is hope. After the hurricane, many grassroots rescues have stepped up to try to fill the void left by an empty Humane Society.
These rescues work day and night and work so hard to get these pets into forever homes.
And with no end in sight, time will tell if and when the Humane Society will once again house homeless pets in Bay County.
It's truly sad.
Allison Baker, News Channel 7.
Many of the area's arts and entertainment venues still have not come back after Hurricane Michael.
Here's a look at the Panama City Marina Civic Center after the storm. Without a civic center to hold concerts and plays, many in the art community felt lost after Hurricane Michael.
When we come back, we'll tell you how they banded together to bring back the arts in a new way, providing hope and healing.
Music and art bring communities together, and they can also bring healing. But after Hurricane Michael, the art community had no large venues left.
As News Channel 7's Victoria Scott reports, determination and a grassroots movement are bringing the arts back to Bay County.
The Marina Civic Center was once the city's largest entertainment venue. Hurricane Michael's wind and water making it nearly unrecognizable inside. The Civic Center and the Martin Theater in downtown Panama City still have not reopened.
I feel like the arts in Bay County is thriving. You just have to look really hard right now.
Hillary McElendon is vice president of the Kaleidoscope Theater, which was also forced to close shop after Hurricane Michael.
After the hurricane, we lost a lot of our volunteers.
The Kaleidoscope crew was forced to work on a new vision and to get the theater in working order again. It finally reopened in June of this year.
I believe that everyone should be able to see live performing arts.
Preserving the performing arts isn't the only thing the art community is focused on. You can still see plenty of murals right here in Panama City.
We want the arts to be accessible by everyone in our community, regardless of socioeconomic status or where you live.
That's where these colorful murals come in. As buildings downtown are being rebuilt, artists are given a unique canvas to showcase their work.
I love seeing the art because I see people taking photos in front of it. It puts smiles on people's faces. It's wonderful to see art out in the open like this, and it's a wonderful addition to downtown.
The Panama City Center for the Arts on Harrison Avenue is also a hub for artists to showcase their work. Within 2 weeks of the storm, volunteers and staff opened the doors again.
Right after the storm, we were so excited to get back and get to work. We reactivated the Center for the Arts with the help of the city of Panama City.
It's all about turning a vision into a reality.
Our goal is always to not make just people want to visit, but to bring people here that want to move and live here, raise families, and help add to this vibrant community that we have.
A vibrant community healing through art. In Bay County, Victoria Scott, News Channel 7.
Just recently, a brand new movie theater opened on 23rd Street in Panama City. That's after 2 of the large movie theaters were damaged beyond repair.
We continue to see arts and entertainment venues coming back, but there's still some work to be done.
Coming up next, we'll take you to some area churches, some with entire buildings that were torn down by the storm.
But never losing faith.
You're watching Hurricane Michael 5 years later, presented in part by Cat 5 Hurricane Fabric and Arbor Tree Care.
It's easy to feel like hope is lost after a disaster like Michael, especially when you see the dozens of churches that were damaged, steeples that were torn off, sanctuaries completely caved in.
But News Channel 7's Nisa Wilkins shows us how broken buildings didn't break the spirit and faith of our community.
Where was God in all this?
The last 5 years, we have learned, number one, to be incredibly patient.
Patience, prayer, and a whole lot of faith. 3 things many churches have relied on while recovering from Hurricane Michael.
This was St. Andrew's Methodist.
Now, 5 years after church walls came tumbling down, many church sanctuaries have been rebuilt.
You know, Nisa, it's really remarkable to think how far the community and our congregation has come in 5 years.
Our focus on what genuinely matters has changed. Even though we're in this beautiful building and we're thankful to God for it because it's a place where thousands get together each week, but it helped us understand it's not about the buildings, it's not about the stuff, it's about the people.
A sentiment even those still waiting to move into a new building share.
And then here's the sanctuary. I'd say the storm and the pandemic have made this group tighter.
Instead of the melodious sounds of a choir wafting through the rafters at St. Andrew's Baptist, the sounds of construction are what you hear now. Still, members say they walk by faith and not by sight.
The church is not a building, it is the people. And they're the ones that are coming to the forefront and continuing to minister to this community.
Pastors told us the very same thing right after the storm.
The church is not a building. It's got to be outside the wall to be effective in the community.
Having a beautiful church building in which to worship is one thing. Having a congregation willing to help neighbors is everything.
Even though we're still recovering, it's going to be a while, we're going to help people who've gone through the same thing because we know what they're going through.
We were able to open our church up and our gymnasium and our youth room in the Community Life Center to other churches. We didn't have a whole lot left to function out of, but what we had, we wanted to share with our community.
5 years later, churches continue to look beyond denominational titles and work together. Because of Hurricane Michael, local churches have been able to prepare for future generations.
We're making 100-year decisions. There will be future generations that gather in this space to worship, to praise God, to come with their families.
This would be a hard statement for somebody to understand. But over the 80-year history of our church, one of the best things that has ever happened to our church was a Category 5 hurricane. Now, I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago.
While there are constant reminders of what we went through, there are other reminders of how far we've come and who has helped us every step of the way. In Bay County, Nisa Wilkins, News Channel 7.
As we reflect on the past 5 years, it's hard not to feel like our faith is what got us through. We saw so many miracles happening all around us in a relatively short amount of time, and we just know that we're going to continue to see many more.
Hurricane Michael truly changed us, but I think overall we're stronger, we're more hopeful, we're a community united, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen in the next 5 years. For all of us at News Channel 7, thank you for joining us.
The preceding program, Hurricane Michael, 5 years later, was brought to you in part by Cat 5 Hurricane Fabric and Arbor Tree Care.